Bomb secured.
While everyone is off talking about how amazing Outer Worlds is, I've instead spent time in the metaphorical trenches, getting deep into Call of Duty 2019 edition, with Infinity Ward's Modern Warfare reboot. Their first game in the Call of Duty series since 2016's Infinite Warfare, a game which I literally forgot existed until I worked on this video. Now, there's been a lot of marketing and hype over this game leading up to its release, with the game promising a much more dark and mature narrative, designed to elicit a more emotional response from players. Yeah, right. Some playtesters even claim the game made them cry, which is like those old horror films from the 1950s, claiming that people in the cinema had heart attacks and died. It's cute. I don't buy it, but it's cute. But the elements are there which make Modern Warfare seem like it is an improvement on the series, at least on the surface. The engine's been totally overhauled and there's no microtransactions or season passes. All of the future content is supposed to be free, so Jim Sterling's gonna have to really scramble to find something to talk about here. And hey, it's being developed by Infinity Ward. I mean, if anyone could make a good Call of Duty, it'd be these guys, right? Well, let's find out. So, when you look at the game on the surface, you've got three main components. You've got the campaign, the multiplayer, and the co-op, or Spec Ops. The campaign at least starts off well enough. You're initially playing as a CIA soldier named Alex, trying to recover some chemical gas being held by Russian soldiers. But before you can extract it, you're ambushed and the gas is stolen. After this, there's a terrorist attack in London, and the SAS, along with returning series favourite Captain Price, is brought into the fight, with the player now controlling Gaz, also returning from the original Modern Warfare.
All stations. Bomb is clear.
These first couple of missions are action-packed and enjoyable. They also show off the new graphics engine, which looks absolutely gorgeous. And I'd say this is easily one of the best looking games to come out this year. Not to mention, if you've got an RTX card, you can also turn on the ray tracing. There is still performance issues with having this on, but it makes a pretty compelling argument for this being a feature in the future. And I gotta take a moment to thank Nvidia for sending me a copy of this game too, it's much appreciated. Overall too, the game seems to run really well most of the time, which is surprising. And you also get that really high level of quality for the sound design and the music, so it's really hard to fault the presentation in that regard. Problem is though, right off the bat, you'll notice how every cinematic is choppy and stutters because they're being used to hide loading screens. So at a time when you're trying to become acquainted with all of the characters, you feel like you're watching a slideshow. I'd rather have just had a 2-minute long loading screen and then watched a smooth cinematic instead of a 2-minute long cinematic that's borderline unwatchable. Outside of the cinematics though, it's not going to take long before the campaign starts to lose its direction, and yeah, it made me want to cry too, but just for the wrong reasons. For the third mission, you're playing as Alex again in the fictional country of Urzikstan, working with the rebels led by Farah and her brother Hadir. And you're going to be seeing these characters a fair bit throughout the campaign. I'd argue the story focuses more on Farah and her backstory than it does any of the other characters.
Follow me.
Anyway, this marks that turning point when you start to see the faults in these highly scripted missions, where if you delineate off the script even slightly and don't do exactly what the game wants you to do, well, you'll often end up being killed or just instantly fail the mission. Like in this third mission, you're supposed to be undercover and sneaking through this Russian-occupied village. So the way you blend in with your surroundings is by simply picking up a cinder block. Without a cinder block though, you're somehow an instant threat and you're gunned down. Imagine having all that experience as an undercover operative, but all you've got to do is just pick up a cinder block. I doubt they covered that at basic training. The fourth mission, you're just advancing on a Russian base, having to basically kill everyone, because despite having a dozen allies to help you, you're still the only person capable of killing anything. A few missions later, you're just holding out on a rooftop, shooting enemies in this pitch black field for like half an hour. Was this ironically supposed to feel like it was taken from the 2007 version of Modern Warfare? Because that's what it felt like. It was this very antiquated series of shooting galleries interrupted by conveniently placed checkpoints. Now this campaign does have some pretty good points though, I'll give credit where it's due. Those missions when you're raiding a house using your night vision goggles as you clear each room one by one are legitimately amazing. And there's an actual sense of tension throughout these. You're kicking down doors, being careful not to accidentally shoot unarmed women or children, and then bad guys are bursting through doors or popping out from under beds. It also looks genuinely realistic at times, and it might be some of the most immersive shooting we've ever had in the entire series. When you control that gunship again for a short stint, it looks and plays really well, and that whole sequence is also a lot of fun. Modern Warfare is really starting to blur that line between the game and reality. And if you showed this to someone who wasn't into gaming, you could probably convince them that it was real. Another mission, you're sniping enemies from a couple of 100 meters away with a rifle equipped with armor-piercing rounds. Able to blow up a car's engine block with a single hit. Now that is dope. You've got to use these flags in the environment as a guide to the strength of the wind and the direction it's blowing. And it actually takes a bit of skill to get used to. But then it's over in 2 minutes anyway, and you're shooting dozens of soldiers with an MG as they rush your position like idiots. Then we get to the writing, which is something that seemed to get pushed a lot pre-release. Like the game was going to be super dark and mature, dealing with all these themes of torture and war crimes. The whole point of the campaign, at least how it was described, was that you'd be forced into this sense of grey morality, where it would become hard to distinguish friend from foe. But that's not really the case, because the good and the bad guys in this game are clear cut, and when one of the main characters does something that comes off as even remotely questionable, it's almost always an act that's done for the greater good. There's a few key points in the story where certain actions of characters comes to light, but they're events that are out of the player's hands. So it's not really like the weight of these decisions falls onto our shoulders. There's only really one moment in the entire campaign I can think of that comes close to forcing you to make a tough decision, and that's one where you either participate in or flat out ignore a torture scene. But the outcome is exactly the same either way. It's about as morally grey as whether or not you choose to play or skip the No Russian mission in Modern Warfare 2. Say for instance in one of those house raids if you were forced to kill everyone on sight simply because that was the rules of engagement. But then we found out that half the people in the house were innocent. Like something like that might have made us question what was right or wrong. You're never given the order to open fire on a bunch of civilians or anything like that. This ain't no Sammy Jackson in rules of engagement type of shit. In fact, if you ever accidentally shoot someone the game deems as a civilian, you're still treated to a game over screen. Unless of course it's scripted. I just don't think they nailed that fuzzy sense of right or wrong they claimed they were going for. Like I said, every act the player does in the game is only ever done for the greater good. In this instance, the prevention of chemical warfare, a nuclear holocaust, and another world war. This all contrasts with some really silly and almost schlocky writing. I don't think I've seen the Russians portrayed so ham-fistedly as bad guys since Rambo 3. Honestly, I think anyone from Russia playing this game should be pissed off. They make these guys look like complete fucking psychos, going around murdering innocent people and wiping out villages with poisonous gas and machine guns. The biggest jump the shark moment in the entire game though, and one that's a bit of a spoiler to be honest, so click to this timecode if you don't want to hear it, is this bit when you're playing as a little kid. And she has to go up against this giant beefcake Russian soldier in what can only be described as a boss fight. You run around this house, crawling through vents and sneaking up on the guy, schwacking him in the legs with a screwdriver or a knife. Oh, but it gets better. You then have to escape the town. So you head for a nearby truck and pick up a revolver, gunning down 2 Russian soldiers. The best bit though is that this girl knows how to reload it. Yeah, there's a reload animation for this thing. She's even got a speed reloader too. I mean, has there honestly been any other video game ever that had a reload animation for a 7-year-old girl? Think about it.
This shouldn't have happened in the first place, sir.
I'm making the whole thing sound like complete rubbish, and look, it's really not that bad. I just think that people proclaiming this thing to be the best Call of Duty campaign in a decade, or acting like it made them super emotional and break down, might have been playing something different than I did. Seeing a lot of these returning characters like Captain, Price, and Gaz is pretty cool. It's neat how they've been worked in again for this reboot. And I like how they even try to set up things again for the sequel. But folks, it pains me to say this. This is not going to make you question your morals, or leave you a whimpering heap from having to do something that goes against your principles.
You know what to do.
The whole thing took me about 6 hours to finish on Hardened, and with a lack of unlockables or collectibles, I don't really see any reason to ever replay it. Next we come to the meat of the whole thing, and that's the multiplayer mode. Now, there are some things I do like about the multiplayer mode. I'm glad that once again it's all boots on the ground combat. They've removed the stupid free kill abilities from Black Ops 4, and it's definitely a more traditional feeling multiplayer mode in that sense. Kill streaks are your UAV, gun turrets, VTOL, airstrikes, and all that kind of stuff. It feels refined and familiar, and I like that. Field upgrades replace specialist abilities from Black Ops 4, and these are all defensive items. And it wouldn't be Call of Duty if you didn't suffer the odd death to some asshole blindly throwing a grenade across half the map.
Grenade out! Flash out!
Speaking of the maps, none of them are all that outstanding, and some of them are just outright garbage. I think the map set in Piccadilly has to be one of the worst maps in a Call of Duty game in recent years. There's just far too many rooms, windows, and paths that it just becomes an absolute disaster for navigation. It's a map taken from the single player that's just been repurposed for the multiplayer, and that's what it feels like. It's not good. It's even possible for one team to be locked down on one side of the map because of how the spawn points work, as there's only 2 paths to get out of that side of the map, which the other team can easily control. The other one that sucks is the Euphrates Bridge, which is just a playground for campers. Kinda reminds me of the Gustav Cannon map in World War II, which had similar problems. One of the new aspects of the multiplayer mode is this whole crossplay feature, meaning if you've got mates who play on the PS4 or the Xbox, but you're on the PC, you can effectively play with them regardless. It's not an entirely necessary feature, but it is a nice inclusion. But still, it won't take all that long to see that this is really just the same old shit with a different smell. The most playable game modes still being Team Deathmatch and Domination. Most people still playing Domination as if it's Team Deathmatch anyway, because apparently a KDR is more important than winning matches. Cyber Attack is one of the so-called new modes, even though it's really just search and destroy with an EMP bomb instead of a regular one. The real proper new game mode though is Ground War, but even then that's really just Domination on a bigger map, with up to 32 players on each team instead of just the regular 10. To navigate these maps you've got vehicles like tanks and choppers, and you can even choose points to spawn in, just like the Battlefield series, which is what it seems like they're really trying to emulate. Currently though there's only 2 maps, and if you thought that camping was bad in the normal modes, well, wait and see what it's like when you're in a giant city with a dozen rooftops for people to hide on. Imagine being friends with someone in real life, then finding out they just camped in a Call of Duty game with a Dragunov. It also suffers from the same issues the other modes have, mainly being the time to kill, which is still super quick, to the point that you often don't even get to see where you're getting hit from. It all just boils down once again to who shoots first half the time. You'll notice inconsistent damage with the weapons, there's bad hit registration and packet loss too. I mean, it's the hallmarks of a Call of Duty game. I had times when I'd stop shooting at someone reflexively and reload, because in my head I had some weird muscle memory thing where I'd shot them enough to think that I'd killed them, but yet they wouldn't die. Just kinda shows how odd the hit detection is at times. Loadouts are the same across each mode, but only a handful of guns in the game are really all that good, which means you'll just see people using these weapons over and over. Currently this seems to be with the M4, and this thing is so overpowered to the point that I don't see how they're not gonna have to nerf this thing. Shotguns also still reign supreme at close range, and it's really easy to abuse these and just go for easy kills. I'm kinda guilty of doing this myself, you know, camping in a few interior spots on certain maps and just popping people as soon as they turn a corner. But when only a handful of guns are all that good to use, what's the point to using anything else?
Standing by.
You can also now hear other people's footsteps as they're running around, which can help you to locate nearby enemies. But the footsteps aren't really as positional like in a similar game like Rainbow Six Siege for instance. So it doesn't really help you pinpoint the direction they're coming from, only that they're nearby.
We're taking Charlie.
But when friendly players are running around too, you've just got this mishmash of sound effects. It's more confusing than helpful. For some reason too in-game, the characters will often automatically make callouts. Like you'll hear someone shout out that an enemy's nearby, which is kinda stupid, because if that person hasn't spotted you yet, well, you basically just gave away your position, and there doesn't seem to be a way to turn this off.
Enemy!
Enemy at the courtyard.
Another thing they've tried to do is make the weapon somewhat more realistic. So now if you're trying to fire a weapon from long range, you'll have to deal with some pretty hefty recoil and bullet spread. Now you can mount your gun and camp like a douchebag, which removes almost all of the weapon's recoil, or you can equip that weapon with attachments. And again, like recent games, you do this by using a weapon over and over, getting kills and earning XP to level it up. Then you unlock new attachments like sights, muzzles, stocks, and all that kind of crap. And the thing is, the difference between a weapon that's leveled up and one that is at base level is night and day. And with the right attachments, you can turn certain guns into lasers. But that grind can be very frustrating because you're really handicapping yourself until you've unlocked some of the better attachments. Just made me less inclined to level up the other weapons, and I just stuck with the M4. One of the multiplayer's biggest faults though is really that at this point, this could be one of the sweatiest multiplayer communities, perhaps ever. At least for a first-person shooter. I mean, the people still playing the game at this point, most of them have been playing every entry in the series for almost a decade now. So when a new Call of Duty game comes out, you're not really going up against a fresh player base. You're going up against people who've migrated over, and who have been prestiging these games since, Black Ops 1. That makes the multiplayer mode kind of crushing and unenjoyable as a casual player, and the matchmaking sure doesn't help too. You've got that golden period of the first couple of weeks when everyone's around the same level, but after that, it all goes to hell. I guess my point is that if you weren't a fan of the multiplayer mode, well, this isn't going to win you over. But hey, maybe you can take a week off school too, or use up all of your spare sick days to play this like most other people do. Finally, we get to the co-op component, which they're calling Spec Ops, but this is Spec Ops by name only. Remember in the original Spec Ops how fun it was with a mate doing all those little challenges on Veteran and replaying sections from the campaign and trying to beat each other's scores? Well, there's none of that stuff here. Currently there's 4 operations that you can play with 4 other players, where you're dropped into a large map and have to complete a series of objectives. The idea is to stealth it as long as possible because once you're detected, there's no way to turn off the alarm, and enemies just keep constantly spawning in, to the point that it starts to feel more like you're playing COD Zombies. In fact, if the enemies were zombies instead of soldiers, this mode might have actually been some fun. There doesn't seem to be any pattern to enemy spawns either. They come from the front, they come from behind, they come from the left and the right. They even come out of the goddamn walls. At one point too, we had 3 juggernauts on us at once. You choose from 1 of 4 roles to play as, and around the map are these little boxes that have items in them, like armor or ammo refills, or even kill streak items like turrets and airstrikes. But I just can't fathom this mode. I have no idea why they included it or who it's supposed to appeal to. If you were hoping for some kind of continuation to the story, which is what this mode claims to do, well, you're not going to find it here. And unless you're in a 4-man group coordinating with all the other players, stealth is pretty much impossible. Spec Ops also shares loadouts in your player level with the standard multiplayer, but the experience you get for playing this mode is piss poor. It just feels like the weirdest and most out of place element to the entire game, and it feels like it's just been thrown in to keep up appearances. If you bought the game just for this mode, well, let me offer my condolences. Maybe with the future DLC they'll beef this up a bit more, but right now it just seems like it's there to take up a spot on the main menu. Overall, I wouldn't really rate my time with Modern Warfare all that much. I found every aspect of one of the game's 3 main components had something that just left me feeling disappointed. This is what I refer to as the Call of Duty cycle, and it happens every year. I see all the footage leading up to the game's release. I believe all the hype and marketing, and I actually get excited, and then I play it, and I'm always underwhelmed and let down. Then I find something else more fulfilling to play, to wash the taste of the game's dick out of my mouth. It's not terrible, it is what it is. It's like going to see Transformers 7 or Fast and the Furious 12, and being upset that all I got was robots fighting or people driving fast cars. So, as Sean Connery would say, I've got no one to blame but myself. The same thing's gonna happen next year, and just maybe, next year, it'll all be better. But I think we all know that that won't be the case. Nothing else, the game sure does look nice though.